For 1500 years, Korea's faiths were Buddhism and Confucianism, temples in the mountains, ancestral rites in every home. Today, that same country is one of the largest missionary-sending nations on earth. How does that happen? This is that story. It begins with the Word. In the 1700s, Korea was a closed kingdom. Missionaries were banned. Preaching a foreign religion was punishable by death. But writings about the Christian God found their way in, written in Chinese, brought back from Beijing. Scholars in Seoul read them. Some of them believed. In 1784, one of them, Yi Seung-hun, traveled to Beijing and was baptized, taking the name Peter. Then he came home and baptized the others. A church had started with no missionary. That had never happened anywhere before. The kingdom saw the new faith as a threat to its social order, nobles and commoners worshipping as equals. Persecutions followed. 1801, 1839, 1846, 1866, thousands were executed for refusing to give up the faith. But the executions had an effect no one intended. People watched the condemned die calmly, and some began to ask what they had believed. The faith survived, hidden but alive. In 1866, an armed American merchant ship, the General Sherman, sailed up the Taedong River without permission. On board was a Welsh missionary, Robert Jermaine Thomas, carrying Bibles written in Chinese. The ship ran aground near Pyongyang. The Koreans set it on fire. Accounts say that as the ship burned, Thomas stood in the water and handed Bibles to the soldiers who had come to kill him. He was killed on the riverbank. His mission seemed over before it had even begun. A local man used pages of those Bibles as wallpaper in his house. Neighbors came to see and ended up reading the walls. The gunboat burned. The Word survived. "15 years later, in Manchuria, a Scottish minister named John Ross translated the Gospel into Korean for the first time, working with Korean merchants. Korean book peddlers then carried the copies across the border themselves, village by village. In 1883, villagers in Soray built a church on their own. No missionary had ever been there. When the first Protestant missionaries arrived in 1885, they found believers already waiting, asking to be baptized. The Word had arrived first. In 1899, a 24-year-old reformer named Syngman Rhee was in Hansong prison in Seoul, expecting execution. In his cell, he read a Bible that had been smuggled in. He later wrote that he prayed, "O God, save my soul and save my country." He survived. In prison, he taught fellow inmates, and about 40 of them became Christians, including the head jailer. He was released in 1904 and left for America. The letters of recommendation he carried were written by missionaries he had known in Korea, and those letters opened doors. He studied at George Washington, Harvard, and Princeton, and gained access to American churches, universities, and Christian leaders. For the next 40 years, American church halls were his platform for Korea's cause. He described Korea to Americans as a nation where Christianity was growing fast, a nation ready to embrace freedom and civilization, a nation that would stand against Japanese imperialism and atheistic communism. Back home, the faith truly kept spreading. In 1907, a revival swept Pyongyang. The city came to be called the Jerusalem of the East. And in 1919, when Koreans declared independence, 16 of its 33 national leaders were Christians, from a faith barely 2% of the population. When liberation came in 1945, the English-speaking, Princeton-educated Christian was already a familiar figure to the Americans, now shaping Korea's fate. With their backing, he became, in 1948, the first president of the Republic of Korea. The founding of the Republic carried, in its symbols, the worldview of Rhee and Korea's Christian leaders. In his founding addresses, he spoke often of gratitude to God, of God's grace, and of God's protection. May 31st, 1948, the first session of Korea's first National Assembly. Its chairman was Syngman Rhee, and at his request, before any other business, Pastor Lee Yun-young rose, and the entire founding assembly stood in a prayer of thanksgiving. Two years later, war came. Division, ashes. The story could have ended there. Instead, in the ruins, the church grew faster than ever. Within a generation, Korea was home to some of the largest congregations in the world. Today, Christianity is Korea's largest religion. Nearly 1 in 3 South Koreans is a Christian. And Korea now sends over 21,000 missionaries to 171 countries, relative to its number of believers, more than any other nation. The country that once received smuggled Bibles became a sending nation. Before the missionaries, before the president, before the republic, the word was already there. The Gospel of John opens with these words: "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." So perhaps this story was never about a book. The Word arrived first, and it never left.